Welcome. This is our first ever hybrid event. We have a site down at Stern College for our students there. We have an in-person place here, and in the Zoomverse, people can join and connect and listen. It's very exciting. It's very exciting to see you all to be here together in person. It's really wonderful. I'm Ronnie Perellis. I'm professor of Sephardic Studies here and director of the Rabbi Arthur Schneier Program in International Affairs. I want to thank our partners on this project, the Center for Israel Studies, the Schottenstein YU Honors Program, and YU PAC. Did I get that right? Okay. And I want to thank the individuals who reached out to their friends and told people about the event, and really that's how this networking works. And it's really, really very special to be here. A few years back, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, the Tel Aviv Review. Highly recommend it. And most of the time, Tel Aviv Review has stodgy professors talking about books that took them 10 years to write. And it's very, you learn a lot and it's deep. And then I hear this guy who's crackling with energy, who's talking about ideas to old problems that no one seems to have any really good real world solutions to. And I said, who is this guy? And this guy is our speaker today, Gidon Bromberg, the visionary founder and tireless leader of EcoPeace. And we're going to hear about what they do. At a time of climate doom and fatigue can affect even the most well-meaning and dedicated of us, it's important to learn about concrete ways to use our human gifts to make the world a better place. And for these solutions to come out of the Middle East, a region filled with strife and tension, but also incredible potential and promise, in a region where so many of us in this room and the wider YU community care deeply about, makes this an especially exciting opportunity to hear about EcoPeace's work. Gidon Bromberg is the co-founder and 25+ year Israeli director of EcoPeace Middle East. Mr. Bromberg has written extensively on the relationship between water issues and Middle East peace, and has presented before the UN Security Council, UN Climate Summit, US Congress, European Parliament, and other international forums. Mr. Bromberg, an attorney by profession, is an alumni of Monash University in Australia, Washington College of Law at American University, and Yale University's World Fellows Program. Great, it gives me great pleasure to have you here. Thank you, Gidon. And I'm going to turn off the lights so we can see you a little better. And please, the forum is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this invitation and opportunity to speak to you from Yerushalayim, where I'm currently being hosted by another colleague very kindly. EcoPeace is a truly unique organization. It's the only organization that exists in any field that is Israeli, Jordanian, and Palestinian together. And when I say together, it's a non-profit organization. It's a charitable organization that has on our board 4 Israelis, 4 Jordanians, 4 Palestinians, and the organization is run out of 3 offices, our office in Tel Aviv, our office in Ramallah, and our office in Amman in Jordan. And we have a director in each office, myself in Israel, and quite uniquely, we run the organization together. And as I said, it's the only such organization, not only in the environment field, but also in general. As the name of EcoPeace suggests, we focus on ecology, we focus on environmental issues, and we focus on peace. And although we didn't know it when we started our work 27 years ago, we've helped create the concept of environmental peace building. And what I want to present today is some of our work in this field, and particularly work that's focused on climate issues and the climate crisis that is impacting the globe and impacting the Middle East in particular. So I'm going to share a slide that I'm going to quickly go through, and I want to make sure that we're left for time for questions. So this is the question that I'm placing for discussion here: climate resilience in the Middle East. Is regional cooperation on environmental issues essential for Israel's and the region's and the region's national security. So I'd be interested to see what you think after this presentation. So first of all, people need to understand that the Middle East, particularly the Middle East, North Africa region, is the most water scarce part of the globe. There is true water scarcity here by nature. We're a natural desert or semi-arid part of the world, so that rainfall is low. There is intermittent water supply in most of the cities in the region of the Middle East and North Africa. We're also an area prone for much conflict, not only the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. All of these colored countries are experiencing different levels of conflict right now. And water scarcity, water insecurity is one of the issues that feeds most of these conflicts. It's not generally the primary issue, but it's an underlying issue. And then when we look at what the models of the climate crisis, this is a Tel Aviv University together with a German university study, there's even more room for alarm, because the most water scarce part of the world, you can see at the moment, we have, let me move my, at the moment, those that are familiar with Israel know that we have rainfall in the autumn. It will rain in November, in December. Well, the models are showing us that by the middle of this century, another 20 odd years away, we're not going to have any rainfall in the autumn months, and the rainfall will shrink only to the 3 winter months of the year. We can expect by the end of this century a 40% reduction in rainfall for Israel and the region. While the rest of the world is worried about a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperatures, we've already experienced that in Israel. In fact, the Mediterranean, if any of you were here this last summer, the temperature of the Mediterranean off Tel Aviv was 32 degrees Celsius. That's 2 degrees higher than ever recorded. So climate change is real. It's happening now, and we need to damn well get prepared, because the impacts of the increased temperatures, a 50% increase in the summer months. So summer at the moment is about 6 months of the year. We expect it to go to 9 months of the year. If any of you have been in the Gulf, the Eastern Mediterranean will look more like the Gulf, but on the worst days. And this is not theory. This is something that is already happening, and something that has the consensus, whether it's the Israeli Water Authority, the Palestinian Water Authority, the Jordanian Water Ministry. There is a consensus across the region that climate change is already happening. It's a threat to water security in the region and a threat to national security interests. And I'll go through what that means. This is one of my favorite maps. You won't recognize this map so much because it's a map of water basins. So it shows us that from an environmental perspective, the geopolitical borders between Israel and the West Bank, Israel and Gaza, Israel and Jordan actually make no sense whatsoever. The Yarkon River Basin that flows through the middle of Tel Aviv starts in Ramallah in the West Bank on the eastern side, and ends in Tel Aviv, of course, on the western side. And it shows that if we don't manage each one of these basins in a cooperative fashion, we're not going to do well. We're not going to survive many of the issues that the climate crisis will throw at us. And I want to give you another concrete example, not due to climate change, but due to that highlights how interdependent we are. This is a satellite image that shows sewage. The red and the yellow is organic matter, and it's raw sewage that's leaving Gaza. This is back in 2017. Now, here the issue is that a complete failure in treating sewage on the Gaza side, that at that particular time led to 108 million liters of raw sewage flowing out of Gaza into the Mediterranean every day. What we try to highlight from this image is that it shows that when one of our neighbors fail, enemy, friend, it doesn't really matter. There are implications also for Israel, for neighboring countries. And as you can see, the sewage doesn't just stay on the coast of Gaza, but it's quite naturally being carried by streams also to Israeli beaches, to the city of Ashkelon, to the city of Ashdod. And it's been responsible for the intermittent closure of Israel's desalination plant in Ashkelon, because you don't want to desalinate polluted water. For those that aren't in the picture, desalination today is the main source of water for Israel. You're taking the water out of the Mediterranean, removing the salt, and then creating fresh water. This is what happens in Ashkelon. This is what happens in Ashdod. So every time Ashkelon closes, that's 15% of Israel's drinking water. With Ashdod, which is also at risk from pollution, that's 30% of Israel's drinking water. And what we're able to highlight by showing this satellite imagery to in the government of Israel, to the public, is that finding sanitation solutions here for Gaza is as much a Palestinian interest as it is as much an Israeli interest as it is a Palestinian interest. Because although politicians can speak about disengagement, you can't disengage from a shared nature, from a shared environment, and the currents of the Eastern Mediterranean reflect that. The water basins that I showed you earlier also reflect that. But at EcoPeace, we're not about dealing with only the problem and describing the problem. We're all about finding solutions. So how do we strengthen sort of environmental capacities and climate resilience? And here we looked at the example after World War II of the coal and steel arrangement of Europe, particularly between France and Germany, where coal and steel last century were the most important natural resources that fed the European economy, the global economy at that time. We asked the question, well, what's the coal and steel that's relevant to our region? And we, in a study that we commissioned, we showed that the coal and steel, or the key natural resources that are relevant at this time for our region, revolve around energy, and particularly renewable energy, of how to harness the sun, and desalination of how to increase water supply, given that water rainfall is on such a dramatic decline. And what our study highlighted is that there are comparative advantages. That Jordan has the comparative advantage of being able to produce renewable energy at scale and at prices that are more competitive than what Israel can do. And that's due to the vast desert areas that Jordan has, and also cheaper labor costs. But also because the Negev is captured. The Negev, half the Negev is military training area for the Israeli military, the other half are protected nature reserves. So Israel is struggling to meet its Paris climate commitments of 30% renewables by the end of this decade, and 100% by the middle of the decade, by 2050, as Prime Minister Bennett just declared in the Glasgow Conference of the Parties on the Climate Crisis. On the other hand, Israel and in the future, if we can get rid of Hamas in Gaza, the Mediterranean has the comparative advantage of being able to desalinate at closest proximity to the population centers of Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians together. And in that way, solar energy can move west, and water can move east, so that we can advance water security, energy security at cheapest prices for all people. And this concept that we presented back in 2017 is the basis of the agreement that was signed between the government of Israel, the government of Jordan, and the UAE just a little over a month ago. So this is not theory anymore. This is today a potentially $7 billion investment program that will help Israel meet its climate commitments that it's currently struggling to meet. We're according to the Ministry of Energy in Israel, only 9% renewable, and we need to be 30% within 8 years. And without investing, without purchasing electricity from Jordan, it's very clear that we're not going to be able to achieve that. And by Jordan purchasing desalinated water from Israel, Jordan is able to guarantee a greater water security, because the situation in Jordan is dramatically deteriorating, whereby in the capital, for instance, water is supplied for only 8 hours a week. So every house has a pipe that brings municipal water, but the municipality can only supply that water for 8 hours. That means that on every house, there's a tank that stores the water for the hours that it's available. That's the hours that you do the washing, that you clean your house, that you do as much as you can with the water as it's flowing and filling up the tanks. And then you're having to make do until the next week. So, showering every day is not a possibility, certainly for poorer families. You can always buy more water through water tankers, but that can be 10 to 20 times more expensive than the municipal water that is supplied in pipes. And for poorer families, which is the majority, that is not an option. It's also an issue to incorporate the Palestinians here. And we have various programs that we're trying to move forward that would also include renewable energy for the West Bank and desalination for Gaza. So the governments are already planning the details of the building of desalination of renewable energy here in the south of Jordan, and then a dedicated electricity line that will move it up to the north of Israel and become the supply, an important source of supply of renewable energy that will also power the desalination plants that take water back to Jordan. So that's the first pillar of our program that builds sort of climate resilience. The second is about rehabilitating the River Jordan. For those that are not familiar with the River Jordan south of the Sea of Galilee, the conflict has basically led to the demise of this river. 95% of what used to flow down this river has been taken, half by Israel and the other half by Syria and Jordan. And instead of fresh water flowing down the river, there's a lot of sewage. There's 600,000 people in Jordan here in the valley that don't have a sewage network, let alone sewage treatment plants. On the Palestinian side, 60,000 people with only one sewage treatment plant, partly connecting 20% of Jericho. And on the Israeli side, although there's no raw sewage flowing anymore, there's fish farms in the Beit Shan area that lead to a lot of pollution to the river. What we're calling for is to clean up the river. So that's a big investment program, but not only to clean it up, but to utilize the desalination plants that Israel has built. So these blue colored dots are the 5 existing desalination plants, with additional desalination plants, the red, coming on board, including for Gaza, hopefully, because they desperately need it. But the idea is to utilize the water energy exchange of moving water from the Mediterranean and selling it to Jordan by using the national water carrier. So Ben Gurion and Prime Minister Eshkol in the 50s and 60s built the largest project ever in Israel, and that's to move water from the Sea of Galilee. Until recently, the Sea of Galilee was one of our major water reservoirs, and water would be pumped out of the Sea of Galilee through a set of pipes and canals and brought to the center of the country, and then for agriculture in the Negev. Well, Israel has just completed a 1 billion shekel investment program to reverse the national water carrier that is linking the desalination plants. And then instead of the water from the Sea of Galilee coming down, desalinated water is about to be pumped to the Sea of Galilee. And that's because the climate crisis, the reduction in precipitation in the north of Israel in particular, has placed a real crisis for the Sea of Galilee. So we've had 3 good winters in a row, but over the last 20 years, we've had 15 years of drought. And these drought periods have brought the Sea of Galilee 4 years ago to the lowest level in historical record. In fact, we risked losing the Sea of Galilee as a freshwater body because of such a dramatic reduction in rainfall, and that the lake could become a saline lake, like the Dead Sea, not the level of salinity, but nevertheless no longer a freshwater lake. So there's a real importance to move desalinated water to make sure that the Sea of Galilee doesn't go saline, that it can remain a water reservoir for the security of Israel. Because if any of these desalination plants are ever bombed, these 5 desalination plants currently produce 70% of Israel's water. So these are critical to Israel's water security. But the lake also is an important reservoir, and we don't want to lose it. But it's more than that. It's also the way that Israel supplies water to Jordan as part of the peace treaty between the 2 countries. So the Yarmouk River, which is here, is the border between Israel and Jordan. And you can see there's a line here. It's a pipe that connects the Sea of Galilee with a canal on the Jordanian side of the river valley called the King Abdullah Canal. And then Jordan takes its water from the Yarmouk directly to that canal. Israel then supplies its Jordan's share of water of the Jordan from the Sea of Galilee also to the canal. And then it comes all the way down until there's another pipe that brings the water to Amman. And as I said to you, water is supplied for only 8 hours a week in Jordan's capital. 4.5 million people get water, 8 hours a week. Irbid, the second largest city, gets water even less, once every 2 weeks. So the water scarcity is really high. And what the second sort of pillar of our proposal is, instead of using the pipes, if we can clean up the river, we can rehabilitate the River Jordan for 9/10 of its journey and take the water just before it reaches the Dead Sea to Amman, and that way supply water. And in that way, rehabilitate nearly the whole Jordan River as a means of providing economic alternatives for the Jordan Valley, because with less rainfall, there's less water also for agriculture. There's increased unemployment. On the Jordanian Palestinian sides, we can reach 30 to 40% unemployment. And if we can rehabilitate the river, remember, this is the river where the Israelites, crossed to the promised land, where according to Jewish tradition, miracles happen on the banks of the River Jordan. But also for Christianity, this is very much associated, the river with the baptism of Jesus. For Muslims, 4 of the companions to the Prophet Muhammad are buried on the eastern side of the River Jordan. Despite the importance of the river to the 3 Abrahamic traditions, we've managed to turn the river into little more than a sewage canal. And this is a proposal of how we promote sort of common prosperity by rehabilitating this river again and attracting tens of millions of tourists to come to a healthy, fast-flowing river. The third proposal that we're now also focusing on is moving forward on water resilience issues, and particularly dealing with water issues between Israelis and Palestinians. And here I need to go back to some history. Those of you that are familiar with the Oslo Accords will be familiar that it was an interim arrangement where there was some progress, but difficult issues were put aside to be decided later. And one of the difficult issues include Jerusalem, settlements, refugees, security. But the fifth difficult issue was water, because at that time, there was only natural water. The natural water, the groundwater along the coast, shared between Israel and Gaza, the groundwater underneath the West Bank in Israel, called the mountain aquifer, and of course the Jordan River system. And moving to a different allocation of how these waters were to be shared would produce winners and losers. It would mean really that Israel would have lost water, because Israel takes the lion's share of the natural water, and Palestinians would have gained. And of course, that's a very difficult issue to agree, because Israeli farmers at that time would have lost their income source, and therefore water was put aside, together with other difficult issues like Jerusalem and so forth, to be decided as a package. Well, because of Israel's leadership in the water sector, both in desalination, as I highlighted to before, 70% of Israel's water comes from desalination today, but also Israel's leadership in treating sewage. So about close to 90% of the sewage in Israel is treated and reused for agriculture. Half the food that we grow in Israel is through treated wastewater. We're the world leader. Spain is next at around 26%. We're close to 90%. The US is around 2%. That's how far ahead we are from the rest of the world. That means that the underlying principle as to why water was a difficult issue to solve is no longer relevant. And today, Palestinians can increase their pumping of the western on the mountain aquifer, as an example. It would require Israel to reduce, but today that can be replaced by increased desalination. And that's important because what exists in Jordan very much exists also in Gaza and the West Bank. So in Gaza, the aquifer is so overdrawn that people can only drink from desalinated water, very small desalination plants where people are filling in jerry cans to bring home, and that's what they can cook with, and that's what they can drink from. So Gaza is back in the Middle Ages, but also throughout the West Bank, like in Jordan, there's a tank on every house. And here again, depending on the area, in the southern part of the West Bank, in the area of Yatta, a city of 110,000 people, they get water once every 2 months in the summertime. That's how scarce it is. Well, we can, and this causes a lot of animosity, a lot of hate towards Israel, and we can solve this issue. No one's dying of thirst. You can always, as I said, order a tanker of water, but also, as I said, that's 10 to 20 times the cost of municipal water, and not every family, most families can't afford that. There's another angle on sewage, which needs to be dealt with, because there's a failure to deal with sanitation issues on the Palestinian side for the most part. And there's about 60 million cubic meters of either raw or poorly treated sewage coming mostly from Palestinian cities, also some settlements. And it either flows west, to Israel, or east to the Jordan River. And that too would be part of the deal, that the Palestinian side take greater responsibility, and Israel further facilitates the building of sewage treatment plants to stop this type of further demise of natural water that is just so scarce to both peoples. Finally, the fourth chapter of what we're presenting is all based on education, and quite uniquely, these are a group of Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian youth, and we've been working in a program called Good Water Neighbors for the last 20 years, and we bring thousands of young people every year together to learn about my water reality, my neighbor's water reality, for the reason for them to come to understand that whether we like it or not, our water realities are interconnected. They're interconnected because the water sources are shared. And when we fail to deal with the sewage and the pollution issues, then we all pay a price. So today we work not only in schools. In Israel, we've developed the first water diplomacy program in high schools, in any high school system in the world, officially together with the Ministry of Education. In the Palestinian Jordanian schools, we don't have the approval of the ministry, but we work with schools through relationships that we've developed with school principals. But we today also work at the university level with young professionals and mid career professionals and eco entrepreneurs, all focused on solution-oriented issues of, well, how do we deal with our shared environment, with the climate crisis that is hitting our region so hard, and how can we make life better? And through that, we think that we know that we change, we remove stereotypes, we start to build trust, we build confidence, and we improve the reality on the ground. The middle photo is one of my favorites. These are Israeli, Jordanian, and Palestinian mayors from the Jordan River. Now, these mayors are jumping into the last clean stretch before it all becomes diverted and polluted. But these mayors are not best friends. These mayors are in the midst of conflict and animosity and this real hatred amongst residents towards each side. But they've come to understand that the demise of the river is at their expense, that they're all losers, that they're losing critical opportunities for their peoples, for their residents, by the Jordan River remaining pretty much a sewage canal. And that the way that they can benefit their region is only by rehabilitating the river. And guess what? Because the river's the border, you can only rehabilitate it if you work together. So a very important statement. This is in front of CNN and BBC, and perhaps more importantly, Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian media. What we see is critical to the bottom up, to try and change the attitude. So we do a lot of work at the decision-making level, such as that water energy agreement, but we equally invest at the community level, at youth, with mayors, so that we're building a constituency of people that understand that certainly on environmental issues, cooperation is not a privilege. It's an absolute necessity for the survival of all of us in the region. So I want to stop there and open up for questions. Thank you very much. So I hope I answered the question, and you're in agreement that cooperation on these issues are very much a part of Israel's survival.
So I got some questions via email before, but maybe does anyone in the audience have a question we can start with on this side? Sure, Alex.
Sure, hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. You mentioned about the water and energy deal between the UAE, Israel, and Jordan. And of course, that became possible through the Abraham Accords, which really marked change in dynamics in the region, and how peace is viewed between Israel and its Arab neighbors. So, how has the Abraham Accords affected EcoPeace, and has it allowed you to expand in any ways?
So absolutely. I think the Abraham Accords here was critical, because on the one hand, without the UAE involvement, so the UAE, and particularly one of the companies, Masdar, it's a government-owned Abu Dhabi company. It's the one that's building the solar facility in Jordan, and I think without the UAE, not only putting in the money, but they're going to operate together with Jordan the whole facility. That has put in a level of confidence to allow Israel to indeed purchase. So Israel will purchase over a giga. That's the largest solar plant ever built that will supply, or for Israel, that will supply that electricity for Israel. And Israel could go as high as 30% of her electricity coming from Jordan, should this first stage, already a big investment, prove its worth. So I think without the UAE investment, that wouldn't have happened. On the other hand, look, we also, I don't want to speak politics, but the change in government in Israel was also essential, because the poor relationship between Netanyahu, the former Israeli prime minister, and the king of Jordan didn't allow many of these types of projects to move forward. And now, with Prime Minister Bennett, there's a very new open door and desire to work together. So that too has played a really critical role to improve again Israeli-Jordanian relations and allow these types of projects to move forward. I think there's many other exciting opportunities. So, both Jordan and Saudi Arabia, those of you might be knowledgeable, green hydrogen is, and particularly green hydrogen, has been identified as the fuel of the future. And green hydrogen requires a lot of either wind or renewable energy to produce that hydrogen. So countries with vast desert areas, such as Jordan, such as Saudi Arabia, such as Egypt, can become major producers of hydrogen, and then sell that instead of fossil fuels to the rest of the world. And here Israel has an important role to play because of the stability of Israel. It's the most stable country to enable the movement then through pipes of green hydrogen onto Europe. And I think that presents a whole set of new opportunities of how we promote cooperation beyond the current countries that have agreements with Israel, to create real incentives, because in the end, that's what's going to move parties, and in that way also bring far more stability to our region.
Thank you. Erica, in Stern, are there any questions down there?
No, but I have a question.
Please.
So the tanks on top of the houses in the West Bank, those are administered from the government, the PA?
No, every household has to buy a tank. If you walk around East Jerusalem, you also see the tanks in East Jerusalem, even though East Jerusalem has 24/7 water supply. But when the houses were built under the Jordanian times, there was back then also an intermittent water supply. In fact, Israel is the only country in the Middle East, other than Turkey, that has 24/7 water. It's not just in the West Bank and Gaza, and it's not just in Jordan, but even Damascus and Beirut don't have 24/7 water. In the cases of Beirut or Damascus, it's due to poor water management. In the case of the West Bank and Jordan, it's due to water shortages. And what it means is that the municipality supplies water for a certain amount of hours, and then so in our staff in Ramallah or in Amman, on the day that water is supplied, many of the staff will come late to the office, because that's the day you want to do as much as you can with the water while it's running and filling your tank, because you're not going to see water again in those pipes for another week, another 2 weeks, another month, depending. And of course, that's an issue that impedes health issues. It's a health issue, it's an economic issue, and it's also an animosity issue. And given Israel's leadership in the water sector, this is not something that needs to continue.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a question on Zoom as well. Who was it? Ed,
Yes, hi, this is Ed Berliner. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. The question I have is, it's like almost any discussion we have with about Israeli security issues, that the Israelis themselves, who are closer to the situation, have a much more liberal view than the Americans, who seem to get their backs up about any mention about cooperation with the Arabs and how can you do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Isn't part of this going to be, I hope not a hopeless effort, to try and turn around the Anglo-Jewish press to show that cooperation with Arabs and Palestinians is really in Israel's best term security interest? Because if you read the current newspapers right now, you would never know that.
So you're absolutely right. Jordan's water security is completely identified as a national security interest by the security establishment of Israel across the board. Water security, increasing water supply on the Palestinian side is identified by the security establishment in Israel as critical to stability in the West Bank and Gaza. And that's not out of generosity. That's out of an understanding that when people don't have enough water for their basic livelihood, for their basic health, for their basic economic needs, they will react. And given the animosity that is felt towards Israel, whether it's justified or not, Israel will become the target of that animosity. For instance, water insecurity in Jordan threatens the viability of the kingdom, of the leadership, and is an opportunity for far more radical elements to take over Jordan, or far more radical elements than the PA to take over the West Bank. When it comes to the security paradigm, there's an increasing understanding that security is not just about military security. Israel has all the military might. That's not the issue. That in the COVID crisis of today, where we see how a virus can destroy our economies, well, when the situation of public health, say take Gaza, becomes so extreme, so real concern from the Israeli communities around Gaza that the deteriorating sanitation issues in Gaza are a threat to their own health, to their own livelihood, because polio and cholera are pandemic diseases that will break out when sanitation issues are so poor. And as I showed you on the satellite image, when raw sewage at such scale is released into the Mediterranean, it doesn't just threaten Palestinian health issues. There's a direct impact on Israeli health and Israeli water security, because it closes down our desalination plants. So,
but if a Rav mentioned any of this at the Shabbat morning drasha, he would probably be fired, or at least driven out. And I'm saying that's not only, and it's not just an esoteric issue. These are the children who are going over to Israel, maybe some of them making aliyah, and we know that they tend to be more, let's say, conservative or right-wing than the normal historical Israeli population. They tend to give the money to whatever, and that's why I said it's almost as if a propaganda, I hate to use that word, effort needs to be used to somehow make it acceptable to talk about peace and cooperation.
So I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We spend our resources, and we're a nonprofit. We live from donations, on the Israeli public, on the Palestinian public, and on the Judean public. Well, I can tell you that it's not easy going for us as well. There are Israelis that don't like the issue of cooperation with anyone on the Arab side, but equally and probably more aggressively, the anti-normalization movement is very much against many of the things that we do and attack our Palestinian and Jordanian officers and describe them as collaborators because they're acting in their national interest, which is cooperating with Israel, and we're acting in Israel's national interest, which is cooperating with Arab neighbors. So this is a crazy situation where we're advancing tikkun olam, and we get condemned for it. But that's the reality. I think not only in Israel and the region, I think that's also prevalent in the United States.
Well, I'd like to thank you for that answer, but I'm too depressed to think about it.
Well, there's always sparks of hope. I know the students have to get going to their classes. I want to thank you for the presentation, for your questions, and more importantly for doing this work. I know that there are internship possibilities, so students who are interested should email, correct, and can look into it. You can email me, and I can put you in touch with who's working, who would be the proper person to talk to. Thank you for making us realize that there are tools, there are things you could actually do step by step, and thinking practically and seeing how bridges can be built. So really, thank you.
By the way, just as an advertisement, we're trying to get a cooperative agreement with Columbia's School of Climate Studies to have the equivalent of a combined plan like we do with engineering now. And I would think that many of the students who might want to get involved in something like that might benefit. So if they want to get in touch with me, my name is Ed Berliner, and we're trying to get that established with Columbia. That would be an option.
So that would be fantastic. We would love to also think about how we could work with both Yeshiva and Columbia on these issues. And I think that, the message that I'm trying to bring and the EcoPeace is trying to bring is that, yeah, there is good reason to remain hopeful that this is not a lost cause, that our survival in Israel, in the region, is very much dependent on cooperating on these issues. And because it's an issue of self-interest for all of the actors, it's seeing progress. And the recent water energy agreement signed between Israel and Jordan is really a breath of fresh air that gives us hope that we can build on this, to build more resilience, to improve the reality on the ground, to build trust, and to understand that we're all in the same boat.
Gidon, can you send me an email?
It's in the chat. You can see the
I just
chat.
put my email address on the chat.
And Ed, just email me. I'm happy to make the connection.
Okay. I just put my email on the chat, so I hope no one's going to get in touch with me regarding my car warranty. I have enough of those calls.
Terrific.
Thank you very much. People can stay on if they want to, but I know students have to get going. I want to respect that. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Gidon.
Thank you very much. Kol tov, litrot. Laila tov.
And have a good night. Thank you,
Laila
Gidon.
tov.
And in person next time.
Yofi, alvai.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Very
Bye-bye.
good idea.